so much for joining me today. This is Riley Davison, and you are listening to Bravo Zulu Radio. Bravo Zulu comes from a military term that means a job well done. And I have a lady in the studio today that's exactly what she does. I have heard so many tremendously wonderful things about her, and I know that she sacrifices in a genuine way for the good of our community. And so it's my honor to be able to bring you Marta today. Marta, welcome.
Thank you so very much for your invitation.
It's my pleasure.
Delighted. Thank you.
So tell me who you are and what is it that you do?
Absolutely. My name is Marta Pelaez. I am the President and CEO of Family Violence Prevention Services. Family Violence Prevention Services is a non-profit. It's an umbrella name under which several programs have been created to provide self-sufficiency and independence to the victims, adults and children, of domestic violence. One of the programs that people will recognize easily when I say it is the Battered Women and Children's Shelter.
Right.
It was our very first program. However, it's not the only one. We have grown and evolved tremendously as we have understood through the 43 years that we've been in place, as we've understood the needs of the victims who are abused by those who claim to love them.
Isn't that incredible that it would be from the family that the greatest threat exists?
Absolutely, and that's a key element in what I would like to share with you, because being the family the most essential and central part of a society, it is unfortunately the one that is most impacted by domestic violence. And every other social deficit, social ill, is directly related to domestic violence because of that reason, because it's the center of society. So you have child abuse is the first one that comes to mind. Child abuse and domestic violence coexist. There is human trafficking directly associated with it too. You have a 13-year-old youngster who is found at 2 o'clock in the corner of our city being human trafficked. That little girl would probably have a different outcome if she didn't have the parents absorbed by domestic violence and abuse. So there is a void in that life of that little girl because of domestic violence.
Certainly. And then it's cyclical because it carries on.
Absolutely. And that is we attempt to do, to break the cycle of domestic violence. Not only intervening the victim, but also the children of that household.
Right.
Generational domestic violence is the perpetuation of domestic violence. So that's why we're so key and focused on helping the children.
So walk me back a little bit, because as a youngster, I did a lot of reading and research and coming through the War of Independence and then through the Alamo and the Civil War. At what point did this type of a situation begin to manifest itself into our homes, that we now have that generational situation?
Oh my goodness. If I'm going to talk about the history, I have to start with 454 BC, when the Romans gave us patriarchy as a law. So that was in fact, the institutionalization of domestic violence, because the woman, the wife, became the property of the husband alongside with the children. She left everything that identified her as an individual and adopted the husband's name. He was responsible for anything that she did. So in fact, the law allowed the husband to beat the wife, to punish her physically, and to erode her self-esteem, in fact, and reduce her to little less than an animal or a thing, an element of property alongside with
Right.
maybe chairs and tables.
That's the word that popped into my mind as a real estate broker, chattel, chattel, which you're simply talking about a physical possession.
Absolutely. So patriarchy then became part of our very own law books and our discourse, and it became part of people's lives. Then religious writings did their own very thing, declaring inferiority of women. All religious writings do the same thing. So it was even more ingrained into everybody's daily life.
Well, traditional religion, by all means, I discussed this before on the program. It has been the manifesting of. It has allowed so many things to go on in the name of God that has really been so detrimental. And I have to admit, you walked me back way farther than I would have expected, going all the way back to BC. And what a shame that the patriarchy laws, which stands for fatherhood,
Yes.
would be the thing that actually was turned against the family and allowed that power to exist that sapped the family of its the beauty within the family.
Very, very, very much truth. So today we continue to talk about the entitlement of men, and it is demonstrated statistically 98% of the abuse perpetrated against the victim is men unto women. That leaves that 2%, right? So men are sometimes also victims of abuse.
Right.
We also help men with our services. We also shelter men and provide the very same level of services because, as I said, sometimes they are the victims of abuse. But 98% of the victimization is done by men unto women.
Even you pointing that out, I was just watching a news report last night where they were bringing out a female soldier that had committed suicide because she had been first raped in Kuwait, and she had reported it and nothing happened, and then she moved on to Afghanistan where she was gang raped, and basically they said, her mother said she was so frightened that there's no way that she would have attempted to report it at this point. It was probably because of the fact that she had reported it in the first place. So I think that there are a lot of things that people don't understand in terms of even the words and the terminology that we use in everyday life. When people talk about a rule of thumb, for instance. Right?
Yes, I'm surprised that you know that, because not that many people know that one. So the rule of thumb, it is said to have come from Romulus, the founder of Rome again, who declared that a woman would not be beaten with just anything. So it was a good deed at the time. So he standardized that element that the husband would beat the wife with to a rod that would be no larger in circumference than the right thumb of the man.
Right.
So that
bigger men, I guess, got bigger rods.
Unlucky woman.
But it's not something to laugh at all,
no,
in any way.
Absolutely not.
Right.
But sometimes we need
Right.
to make light of these unfortunate and deadly events. So the rule of thumb came from that. It
Romulus.
is said to have come. There's been controversy
Right.
about it, but
I know that I've seen it referred to back in England, and I know that that's where.
Absolutely.
So I was going to kind of tease you a little bit and speak as a fool and say, this doesn't exist in our community, right? And knowing better.
In fact, the incidence of domestic violence is the highest in San Antonio in the entire state of Texas. We have been registering an upward trend for the past maybe, I want to say 8 years. In 2018, I remember at a luncheon that we had, a fundraising luncheon, 600 plus guests. That year we had 28 fatalities. That was the most that Texas had ever had, and that was right here in our very own San Antonio. Today, we are at 35. I believe it's 36. I
And
believe it's
so these
36.
are just women.
Oh yes,
Right.
fatalities.
Right.
Yes.
So not even counting children or anything like that. We're simply talking about women that have died at the hands of the abuse within their own families.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. And you brought up children again. The children make up the largest number of victims of domestic violence. A mother of 36 years, this is part of our demographic statistics. A 36-year-old mother comes in the company of her 3 children, ages 8, 3, and 6 months, baby in her arms. That is the very picture of what domestic violence is. If those 3 children are not appropriately and timely intervened, you have right before the answer of why the incidence of domestic violence is exponentially growing in our city.
Right. Because if a young girl exists in a family like that, then she's much more likely to allow that in her future relationships.
I don't think that allowing it is perhaps the proper verb to use.
Okay.
She perhaps comes from abuse.
Mm-hmm.
That's what she saw in her life. And as a child, we all begin to relate to those patterns and make all of the necessary adjustments as we grow up. And she is adjusting to watching her mom being victimized, and she gets the cues from what she's seeing.
Right.
And so when she grows up and she is a young woman and she begins to relate to the other sex or establish relationships of a romantic nature, then she will unconsciously look for someone that will be a good match with all of those adjustments that she has made while she was growing up, and that includes playing the role of the victim.
So you're actually describing PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder.
Absolutely. All the women that come to the shelter, with no doubt in my mind, they have PTSD. Absolutely.
So, somebody out there. So, how many women would you say, from your standpoint, how many women are affected by something like this in our community now, San Antonio and Bexar County?
Sure. In Bexar County, in Texas, because Bexar County has contributed to pushing the statistics that far, 1 in 3 is the statistic. 1 in 3 will find herself in an abusive relationship. And
That's incredible.
it is incredible.
So, what is it about Bexar County that lends itself to this situation?
I truly believe that the generational aspect of domestic violence has the largest role to play in answering that question that you just asked.
So it's socioeconomic, it's educational, obviously.
It's educational, it's generational. I mean, these are families that come from parents who abused, who come from parents who abused, who come from parents who abused, and that gets to be normalized. That is what happens. So again, you grow up and you find nothing different than what you saw your mother go through. So, and she wasn't killed, she didn't die, so this is what happens. This is what I need to cope with.
Is there a situation at all where that race or ethnicity comes into play here?
Well, I have to say that we are majority Hispanics in San Antonio. The majority of victims are Hispanic, and the majority of perpetrators. We also have a program to intervene perpetrators. So that's why we have statistics. The majority of the perpetrators are Hispanics. So I have to say that in San Antonio, there is that cultural element that plays a role. that needs to be further qualified by saying that everybody, all races, all
Sure.
people of all walks in life fall prey with the same statistic. 1 in 3 will be a victim of domestic violence.
Wow. So then, in essence, it's not just the fact that we are heavily Hispanic here in this area, because obviously, because we are, the population rises to that level. So it's 1 in 3 across the board, no matter what race or ethnicity you are.
It
Okay.
is.
So,
Absolutely.
because I was going to ask whether or not that, because I was taught when I was growing up that there was, there are nuances within every different ethnicity, and the Hispanic, there's that machismo, that attitude and that way of carrying yourself.
It has other expressions among other ethnicities. You have bully among the Anglos.
Right.
I mean, so women may not say machismo, but the term machismo has been used enough that has crossed through the cultural barriers, and every culture understands machismo when we speak of it, right? For
So,
what it is.
As we move forward, I mean, what's the solution? Where do you go from here? Certainly, you must be, when you lay your head on the pillow at night, you must be so grateful that you've been of help to so many. And yet, in essence, as our population grows and what have you, it's got to be pretty frustrating.
It is very frustrating at the same time that I have to recharge my batteries and the batteries of the staff that works alongside with me by reflecting on the incredible reward that it is to participate in making sure that a woman and her children have the possibility of finding the hope, because they come hopeless. The possibilities, because they come completely dependent on the abuser, and the dignity that the abuser has taken away from them, from the progressive pattern of control and power that he uses to reduce her to a shell of what she used to be, or her potential.
And that's the point.
Yes.
That's the point of all of it, is to break her down to the point where she becomes a vassal, if you will, and then I guess then he turns and looks for another victim.
And the main element in that strategy of power and control is the result of that is the fear. So the woman is driven to adjust and to do everything that he does because she believes in his threats. She has seen things that no one has seen. She has heard things that no one has seen.
And wonders whether or not anyone would believe her if she speaks up.
Absolutely. So when he says, "I will kill you," she does believe that, because he has probably strangled her several times. He has probably rendered her unconscious several times. He has probably cleaned the floor with her body while pulling her from the hair around the
So
kitchen
you've
floor.
literally seen all
Oh
of it.
my goodness. Yes. I've seen what can be done to another human
How long does
being.
it take for that, to go from the beginning of the abuse to that point that you just mentioned?
I cannot give you an exact amount of time, but what I can tell you is that it never begins with a frontal, brutal attack. He still has to go through all of the conquering and all
It's
of the
grooming.
Absolutely, that's the perfect word. He begins to groom, and then put downs, name calling, isolation, slow progressive isolation, you cannot go here, no, you don't go there, you cannot see your family, cannot see your friends, no, you cannot manage the money, you can, until, finally she is all his possession.
Wow. So, what is it that you find when the lady finally realizes, okay, something's wrong here, I've got to do something? What is that trigger usually for them?
What is it that we do?
Well, no, what is it?
Her?
What is it when the ones that leave, and they finally said enough is enough? What is it that triggers that response?
When I talk about leaving, a victim leaving, I have to remind everybody that as horrific as the situation it is that she lives in the home, she is more afraid of leaving. So it is very usual, if not the majority of the time, that woman is brought to us by the police department or the sheriff's department because she did not have the opportunity or was completely conquered by fear, possessed by that
We
fear.
fear the unknown.
Absolutely. Well, it is the known, the fear of the known, because the
threats, you mean?
yes, the threats are very, very, very direct and very specific. This is what I'll do to you. I'll take the children away from you, and you will never see the children again, or I will hurt the children.
And
that's
it
all you
happens-
have to say to a
and it
mother.
happens sometimes, right.
Yeah, that's all you have to say to a mother for the mother to just.
And
do
she's
not-
willing to go through whatever it takes in order to
Absolutely.
avoid that from happening to her children.
Absolutely. So you asked me what is it that we do. So when they come under those circumstances, they're not self-referring to us. We have to start very softly, very patiently, letting her know that there are other ways, that there is something else on the other side, to give us the chance to please go to one counseling session and experience what it is to be validated, to have your emotions validated, not to mock your tears, not to laugh at your depression. How does it feel? So that's what we ask. Then we offer legal services as well. That is the first line of solution for the problem until she arrives at emotional stability and all of those things good for her. Legal services, the law is the first barrier because it can act when it does. It can act immediately and present.
When it
us.
does, how incredible! You have to
When-
qualify it that way.
When it does, yes, and I want to say that when it does because it doesn't always.
Right. I'm curious as we bring it to a close. What percentage of men that have perpetrated this type of a situation, what percentage of men go on to do it again in a new relationship or actually make the change that's necessary to be a real man?
These actions, these very cowardly actions, come from a lack of self-esteem, come many times, if not the majority of the times, from abuse. These are men who have endured abuse when they were little. So they carry on a rage that they have had to keep pented there. So absolutely. So when in the intimacy of the home, they feel completely free and at liberty of doing the unthinkable to the person who least deserves it.
Mm-hmm. And it's most on their side.
Absolutely.
And obviously drugs and alcohol play a huge part as well.
Yes, because they become somebody else when they are under the influence.
So the lady that's listening right now, or the friend of the lady that's listening right now, that recognizes this situation in their lives or the lives of their friends, what do they do and how do they do it?
Very safely, and by very safely, I mean only the victim knows what that means. Call the police or call us. Our number is 210-733-8810. 8810.
And if they didn't know that automatically, then they could, I would imagine, they can call 211 and they can be transferred to you.
911 is the police, and now
Okay.
now they can text 911,
There you go.
and the police will return the text, and
There you go.
so that they can converse without the phone, making.
So if you're listening out there and you recognize this situation, then you need to take steps for yourself and for your family. And I hope that we have been of some service. And Marta, I cannot tell you how impressed I am with your presentation and how honored I am that you chose to be here.
I thank you very much for that words. Let me just say that it's not just me. There is a whole staff that helps and that assists and works to make life better and easier for the victims of domestic violence.
Thank you, Marta. So
Thank you.
may we all find the hope that you were talking about.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.